Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Over the Cap podcast. It is January 6th, 2024, and this is Jason Fitzgerald. You can find me on X at Jason underscore OTC, or you can email me, jason at overthecap.com. Happy New Year's to everybody. I think I'm still allowed to say that for a couple more days. I think you can still wish people a Happy New Year. So, Happy New Year's to everybody that is tuning in this week. I will give a Happy New Year's as well to my mom and dad, who will listen for about 5 minutes. So this is in their listening zone, so I'm guessing they will pick up on this one. Beer of the night tonight. Yeah, it's a sad night, and sorry, the camera, something wasn't working right with the camera. So if you're watching along on YouTube, we'll just do the screen capture. No camera going on. But the sad news, the beer of the night looks like it's probably going to be Michelob Ultra. Basically, I got a ton of beer for Christmas. I got a lot of 6 packs, got 12 packs of stuff, and I think the word was out that we need to kind of finish off all these lingering beers that are in the fridge. So when I do the little low carb stuff every now and then, I'll buy some Michelob Ultra or one of those types of beers. I never finish them all, whatever I end up getting, and then it just kind of gets pushed off to the side. So since I don't have the one beer fridge, basically I think we got to start clearing this old stuff out. So there are probably a couple other things in there, but I know I saw at least 3 Michelob Ultras, and there's probably one, I don't know, Miller Light something. I have no idea what that one is. But I know if I start out with a lingering IPA or something, and then I have to move to this, that's a disaster. So I figure we will go through it, and we'll do the Michelob Ultra for tonight, and maybe we'll get to something better if I have less of these than I thought. But we'll see how that goes. Nellie is here, and Nellie is snacking on a treat. Nellie, you have anything for the audience? Nellie's got nothing for you. Yeah, it's been a bit of a week. I thought I would maybe do this last week, that we could get one in because there was so much stuff about Russell Wilson. But then between New Year's and we had some car issues that were more just a nuisance than anything else, but kind of took an entire week to get fixed. So we've been kind of fiddling around with the one car between the two of us, but at least we're past that now. If you live in New Jersey, there's really not much in the way of public transportation options throughout much of New Jersey. So you pretty much are relegated to a car, and if you both work, well, pretty much you need 2 cars. So it's a little bit tricky to do with one, but we got by for a couple days there with the the one car and just driving, one drives one and everything else. But a windshield wiper issue. And that basically closed the car down for like a week. So between all that running and everything, it was like, I don't even have time to jump on to do a podcast. In there was just too much travel time during the course of the week. So anyway, I guess the first thing to do here is we'll do the Russell Wilson stuff, even though this is kind of old, I guess, at this point. I think the shock of Russell Wilson being benched is pretty much gone, but I didn't understand why people were so surprised that Wilson got benched. The way people were talking about it online, it was like this stunning thing. In my mind, it's like, I don't know why they didn't do it sooner. Now, maybe it's because they were winning football games, and you can get into the reasons why they were winning or why they weren't winning. But maybe, that wasn't the time to make that kind of change, especially with, within the team itself. Though I don't know how much they really care about that. A lot of these guys in Denver probably are not going to be back next year. And I think in general, the whole locker room thing, it can be a little bit overrated. I think I'll talk about that a little bit more. We talk about Justin Fields later on. But, they stuck with him there for a little while. I'm sure some of that, too, is you kind of go over the different scenarios that can exist with a player getting injured, and what's the timeline on recovery from those injuries. And I think that probably played a little bit of a role, and I'll explain what that means in just a minute here. But this was something that I was talking about last. I think the first article I wrote about it was either last October or last November. And by last, I mean of 2022, not November of 2023, of 2022. It was either late October or early November of 2022. It was already, how do you get out of this contract? And at the time, my thought was, there's really no way out of the contract, right? That's a given. The contract was, just turned out to be a really bad one, and trade historically is going to go down as one of the worst trades of all time. But I thought it was, you bring in a quarterback to kind of compete with them, and if Wilson just plays kind of like average or below average, maybe you move on to a different quarterback, because you're trying to protect yourself financially, and you're trying to kind of protect the future, of your organization and your salary cap health and everything else with, playing him versus playing somebody else. And, it took them a while, it seemed like, to get there. And they did bring in Jarrett Stidham, and I don't know if that was really competition, but I guess maybe that was insurance, that you're at least bringing in a guy who's got some NFL experience. And, again, I think ideally the way they probably would have wanted this to work out would have been that he was probably playing at a average level, which is kind of what he was, maybe a little tiny bit above average, but I'd say probably average overall. And I think it was frustrating. The couple times that I would watch seemed like there was a frustrating aspect of it for both him and for the head coach. Not on the same page. Maybe not to the extent, if you're an old Jets fan that remembers Neil O'Donnell with Bill Parcells, but kind of that thing where the coach maybe doesn't really have a real desire to have the quarterback there, and just kind of tries to work around it. But I think probably for Denver, they would have liked if the team would have been like 0-1 to start the season, then 1-1, then 1-2, 2-2, 1-3, 2-3, and then maybe you get to 3-4, and you start saying, okay, time to move on, or even 4-3 or 4-4, however you get to a certain point. But really what happened was they had the sluggish start, and then I think things started to get a bit better. Let me see if we can just look up the Broncos schedule here. Let's go to Pro Football Reference. And let's see how this shook out. Yeah, you see, they started off terrible. 0-1, 0-2, 0-3. They get to 1-3. Then it's 1-4, 1-5. And then it was just a lot of wins. 2-5, 3-5, 4-5, 5-5, 6-5. And it's hard to pull a plug after you've rattled off that many wins in a row. Even if you want to say that the wins did come by kind of some fluky turnovers, defensive play, whatever the case may be, it becomes kind of hard. But, going back to Wilson himself, let's pull up his contract here. And I know we did a podcast on this earlier in the year where we really got into the weeds on the money and the way everything worked. At least I think it was a podcast. If it wasn't a podcast, it might have been a standalone video. Explaining it. But basically the gist of this is that Wilson next year has $85 million in dead money. Now, that money's sunk cost. That's absolutely lost to the Denver Broncos. There's ways they can split that up, whether it's going to split it 35-4 next year, and then the remainder of it they take the following year. That's a possibility. I don't know how this exactly works with the option that's in it. The options are treated a little bit weird. He has an option bonus that's due to him next year that's worth $22 million, I think. I don't know if exercising an option, if that's considered a renegotiation of a contract. I know for other rules in the collective bargaining agreement, it is, which means you can't June 1 a player because you're not allowed to do a renegotiation until after the season. I'm sorry, You're not allowed to do a renegotiation after the season. You have to get it done before the end of the regular season if you want to use a post June 1 designation on a player. So I don't know if that option would preclude them from that. If it doesn't, it's $53 million next year, the balance the year after that. Okay, those are all sunk costs. That's just a matter of how does it fall on the salary cap. Is it going to be something like 33, 53, 55, 33? And I know those numbers are wrong there. I was just going off the top of my head with some of the stuff there. I think it's 53, 32. I think are kind of the two numbers that are floating around in my mind, at least. But the big thing is that in 2025, he has a $37 million salary that at the moment is guaranteed for injury, and that's fine. You can, if you're a player, you get hurt. Let's say Russell Wilson gets hurt right now. If he was a starting quarterback for the team, let's say he broke his leg, he would certainly be healed by 2025, so the injury guarantee wouldn't matter. The issue that was at play was that this 2025 $37 million salary, if you look at the notes on his page, in 2024, on March 21st, and that date is probably wrong. It's fifth day of the league year. I think I based this on the league year starting on the 17th. I think the league year starts 15th this year. And I'll change those as the offseason kind of goes on. But 2025 salary is guaranteed. So basically what that tells you is that if Wilson was to get hurt and not be healthy by that March 20th time frame, his 2025 salary would be guaranteed. So now you'd be on the hook for, the $35 million cap charge in 2024. All right. Then you'd be on the hook for 49.6 dead that exists already, plus another 37 million, that would be salary that's now guaranteed. So you'd be looking at a 3-year period of about, I think it was like 124 million. That you'd be spending on him. So, that's just way too much for a team, for an older quarterback who, even if you want to say he was average this year or even a little above average, he's not playing at a $50 million level, which is basically the value of his contract. Even if you take it as the effective value with the fact that they did get the 2 cheaper years in there, let's call it $40 million. He's not playing at that level either. He's playing at a much lower level than that. And, you're talking about a player who's 35 this year, going to be 36 in 2024, 37 in 2025. You're declining. You're not getting better. You're getting worse at this point. You might be able to string a couple of weeks together. It's probably going to be pretty hard to string a season together that really goes above what's been going on. So that's the reason that they're kind of protecting themselves by putting him on the bench. When you talk about the severity of injuries, and this is where you get into the timing of it, basically if you were to get the type of injury at any point in the season that is like an Achilles, an ACL, that kind of stuff, if you're Denver, you're screwed, right? Because at that point that money is going to kick in, because the rehab on those kind of injuries is basically a year. Certainly it's going to take some time. As the season goes on and you get closer and closer, now you start to get into the area where minor injuries can come into play. Minor injuries in the NFL are much, much more common than the real major catastrophic injuries that kick in those injury guarantees. And, the injuries that can happen, sometimes you might not even think that it's that big. It could be something like a broken finger. But a lot of times it's accumulation of stuff. And, it's when you hear about he's playing through a bad shoulder. He's kind of playing through a bum knee. He's playing through some tendonitis in the elbow, whatever it might be. And then next thing you know, in January or February, unbeknownst to any of the general public, the player goes and he gets some type of minor procedure done. Something will come out after the fact that, he had a procedure to clean up his knee, all good. He'll be ready for for OTAs in June. Well, if that happens and you get some type of surgery to clean up a lingering issue, clean up something that happened late in the year that you could play through, but you know, deserves the to get operated on at some point. That would protect him because the physical therapy aspect of it, the rehab that comes from those surgeries, is going to carry you past that March deadline. So the later you get in the year, the more that you have to worry about kind of minor stuff actually kicking those injury guarantees in. This is actually what happened with a different scenario, but that's kind of what happened, I believe, with Jalen Smith with Dallas. And I got all over the Cowboys for not releasing him earlier on. As it turned out, that was another one of those where he had a procedure that was done that he had to get done. It's not like he wasn't injured. And that basically precluded Dallas from being able to release him earlier. So, those are the kind of things that you kind of run into as you get later in the year. So I think that's why they waited until they realistically fell out of playoff competition. I know that there was a very narrow path to get there, but I think they just waited until they fell out of it, to make sure that, that they were kind of protected as best they could be. Then you had the other aspect of it, because when this happened, like I said, I wasn't surprised by it, and basically said, I wonder what took him so long. And as it turned out, it really didn't take him that long. So this was originally brought up to Wilson, that he was going to get benched back in late October, I believe, early November. I'm going to pull up the letter in a second here. Basically, what happened was right around the same time that we did the video podcast or whatever, looking over all the options that they had with Wilson, the ways you can play with the money and what the options were that they had. Right around that same time, probably a couple weeks later, and it was during their bye week, so that kind of makes sense. You try to do some business on the bye week. Basically, what happened was exactly what I had mentioned. You go to the player and you essentially say, look, if we can't change the language in your contract to remove this vesting date or the injury protection or whatever is in there, we can't have you start anymore. We can't risk that money. We just can't. We can't make that kind of salary cap risk or whatever kind of financial risk you want to call it. Let's call it a salary cap risk. We can't do that. For the good of our team. So you have to modify your contract and take that out. And the way that, for me, I thought maybe one of the ways that you kind of sell that is you're kind of saying that your best chance of earning now, even though he's earning in 2024 this money no matter what, because that $39 million salary in 2024 is guaranteed. Even though you're earning that, your best opportunity to play football is going to be in Denver next year. If you waive the fact that we would have to have you on the roster in 2025, we'll give you legitimate chance at playing in 2024. And you can do stuff where you front some salary, do some things to move up some money, whatever you want to do with that. And it was his right to say no, which he did. Now, I don't know if they offered to move any money or anything like that, but it sounds like that was basically what they went up to him, and they did. Basically said, this is your best opportunity. Waive it or we're not going to play you. But that brought in a whole can of worms. So I think this is the first to have it. Let's open this up. So let's get a copy of the letter. And I clicked on the wrong thing. There we go. Okay. So basically they went, so yeah, early November. November 4th is when this is dated. And basically they went to the Players Association to say, look, this is what went on. And the Players Association came back with this letter, come to our attention that the Denver Broncos recently informed Mr. Wilson and his certified contract advisor that if Mr. Wilson will not renegotiate his player contract or relinquish certain salary guarantees, the Broncos will remove him from the starting lineup. If the Broncos follow through on the club's threat, the club will violate, among other things, the collective bargaining agreement, Mr. Wilson's player contract, and New York law. We are particularly concerned that the Broncos still intend to commit those violations under the guise of coaching decisions. Accordingly, we write to notify you that the NFLPA and Mr. Wilson reasonably blah, 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 blah. That part's not important. Basically, that they're, basically just telling them that they need to preserve all communications and, that there's going to be arbitration, there's going to be court case, and all these different things that come up. So this is one of the things that's kind of, that you get into these silly scenarios, he said, she said, and, the first report on Wilson's being benched, I think was Ian Rappaport. It may have been Schefter, but I know Rappaport was the first one to frame it as a football decision, which was funny because his first framing of it was gives them financial flexibility, followed by that really didn't play a role. It was a football decision, which is, it's just so funny because it's almost like in, directly answering this letter. When these kind of letters come out, one of the bad things with it is it's a one-sided case, one side of an argument, right? And if you ever, just read stuff, just turn on any of the news stations, right? And, you've got two wildly different interpretations of the same thing depending on what channel you put on. From a political standpoint, you can bring someone on who's a constitutional scholar, probably employed by some school somewhere, legal advisor, whatever. Who knows what the credentials are for anyone involved, but, you got to imagine there's some credentials. You put on MSNBC, there's going to be one interpretation of it. You put on Fox, there's going to be a, complete opposite interpretation of it. Both people who, are quote unquote constitutional scholars. From a legal standpoint, right, you're representing someone. You write a letter, that says you've done this wrong, 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 this wrong. The other side says, didn't do this, 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 didn't do this. And, it's like the answer is always somewhere in between. Because the Broncos didn't really get ahead of this, it was almost taken, and especially because of the way the situation played out, that Wilson kept playing, almost taken as you look at this and you say, oh boy, the Broncos really screwed up. Look, they got this letter. It's illegal. You don't know that. This is what arbitration is. This is where you go, in front of that and determine. To think that this stuff doesn't happen in the NFL, I mean, that's crazy, right? We can go back. Colin Kaepernick, it clearly happened to. He was benched with San Francisco. When he finally waived certain future guarantees in his contract, he was back in as a starter. That was called a football decision before that. Derek Carr last year very clearly was benched. Not that he was good, but he was benched because the Raiders were afraid that more guaranteed salary would kick in, and they didn't want that to happen to where they were going to be stuck with the player. So they benched him. Coincidentally, for the same guy Russell Wilson got benched for, I believe. These kind of things happen. RG3 had an injury guarantee. They put him on the scout team. They were afraid he was going to get hurt in practice. They had him playing like scout team safety, like basically just doing walkthrough drills. He wasn't allowed to do anything else, I don't think. Every year you see players who are restricted free agents on non-guaranteed salaries, and the team goes to them in August, I know your salary is supposed to be $2.7 million this year, 2.9, whatever it is. We can't afford that. If you're willing to take a salary of 1.5, we'll guarantee you the 1.5, but otherwise we're going to cut you. So Wilson's side took this as a threat. And that was the specific word that was used. And the reason that the word threat, I think, is used, and I'm sure the Broncos did not threaten him. in the sense of like an actual threat. But he took this as like what they're doing is they're getting in front of me, and they're threatening my livelihood if I don't agree to this contract. Contract modification. So by using the word threat, what he's saying is you're punishing me. Like this, me not playing is a punishment. And that is the part that wouldn't be allowed under the CBA. The CBA has a clause in there that this dates back to Terrell Owens. If you're old enough to remember Terrell Owens and some of his antics when he was on the Philadelphia Eagles, it got to the point where they basically told him to not show up anymore. I don't remember if that was after criticism of Donovan McNabb, whatever it was. They said, do not show up for work. Like, we'll pay you, do not show up. And, it's almost like that really is not in the spirit of the NFL, right? It's almost like, you're blocking a player from playing. Two, you're blocking a player, all the other teams from having an opportunity to employ that player. So, what happened with that one is that decision, and that's in the collective bargaining agreement now. Too lazy to pull it up. But there's something in there that basically says the longest that you can deactivate a player in regards to conduct or whatever, as a punishment, basically, is 4 games. So on Wilson's side on this, it was that he was going to be benched and deactivated. Meaning he wasn't going to be allowed to even be on the team. And in a sense, it almost like being told to be home, that potentially could be a violation of the CBA. With the way that they, you went around that. I'm not saying it is, just that you could look at that as saying, okay, this is a violation of that. I don't know about any of these other things. I'm not going to know about the New York law. I don't really know where that necessarily applies in this part of it. Typically in this case, I would imagine any lawsuit would be brought under state of Colorado. But maybe there's some stuff that supersedes on the NFL level. And I really don't know how that would be also a violation of the player contract, because the player contract doesn't guarantee you playing time, right? Like, was Kenny Golladay guaranteed playing time? Now, you could say very clearly Kenny Golladay stunk, but, you're also protecting yourself from some of those finances possibilities there. But, it's like the only thing I could think of in that, and I would think this is kind of a stretch, but it's that, you enter into an agreement in good faith, and both sides do agree to that, right? You both are entering a good faith agreement. And if Denver never had any intention of honoring the 2025 injury guarantee, maybe you could say that's a violation, that they didn't enter into that contract in good faith, that they negotiated this with no intention of honoring that. So maybe that's where that was. But, none of this is set in stone. This is all stuff that would go to arbitration. So anyway, I think in hindsight, hindsight's always 20/20. There was probably a way for them to go about this from Denver's side that maybe was a little bit less, maybe a little less overbearing, and I'm not sure that it was, but maybe something that could have been worded a little bit different, to get rid of that possibility of someone saying this was a threat, for that kind of stuff. So, I think when you see them wait, you could see that it was just like, okay, look, we don't want to get down this road of arbitration and, getting in with this. Like, it just becomes a distraction. So I think their thought was probably, we're going to ride this out until December. Again, my thought would be they were going to bench him for 4 games. This way, it would, if someone wanted to argue punishment, which clearly you can't punish somebody for their contract, but if somebody wanted to argue it, it was that the most they were sitting was the 4 games. But then the other thing is that it's not like he was deactivated, right? He's still on the roster. He's the backup quarterback. So, that makes it a little easier to do. And very, very obviously, the framing that went out to the guys from the NFL Network, which were that it was a football decision, that, ironically, Wilson's best chance to, play as a starter next year would have been to accept, pushing that guarantee off. Like, now it's going to be harder for him. Like, those were all things that were, leaked from the team side as damage control. And that kind of stuff, even if some of that is true, it rings hollow when you're doing it at that point, especially after something like this comes out. But, I think that's why it was done for 2 games. It's very easy at that point. And I think you have the Carr example to fall back on to basically say, look, nobody brought anything up about Carr last year. And we fell out of playoff contention. We want to see what we have in our other quarterback. The offense wasn't really getting the job done. And we just want to see what we have for next year. And this is what teams do. And I think that becomes very difficult for the Players Association to really argue against. As for what this contract ends up being, I mean, Russell Wilson's basically going to make about $60 million a year from Denver for 2 years of service. I mean, it's wild when you look at it. How much money he's going to make. Now, I don't know if we have the full value on here that he earned. Probably not. We probably don't have this year's money in there yet. That he's earned on the site to load it in. I'm in the wrong spot. Let me see if we have everything there. Nah, I think we only have the new. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look to see what we've got there. But, essentially, yeah, he's going to earn, about 120 million, give or take a little bit, 124 or something like that for 2 years of service. No playoffs, loss of multiple first-round picks, second-round picks. It's a disaster of a trade. When you look at the scope of the contract, I mean, this is worse than the Jamal Adams. This is basically, they didn't do enough with the picks. They're not going to get enough back from the picks to have it look this way. But this is probably the closest modern example there would be to like the Herschel Walker trade. Where, you give up so much and the return just really isn't there. Now, I don't blame him for trying. You're trying to get somebody. They thought this is what it was going to be. They wanted Aaron Rodgers. When they didn't get Aaron Rodgers, it was probably, the panic button gets hit. And it's like, well, who can we get? And I think the mistake that was made, and I know there was a lot of talk about, I think ownership in flux and everything else. But, you're conducting football business. It is business as usual. It's not like you didn't sign anybody in free agency. It's not like you didn't do anything. And you knew you were bringing on salary when you were bringing him in via trade. There's ways I'm sure you could have deferred if that was the worry. Deferred some stuff to where it would have been the responsibility of new ownership versus old ownership. The delay in doing a contract extension with him was really the mistake, because this deal should have been done the minute they traded for him. And at that point in time, not that it would have made it that much better, but you would have been looking at an extension that was probably in the ballpark of like $42 million a year, $40 million a year, not $49 million a year is what it ended up being. Probably wouldn't have been as bullish on a guarantee. Let me see. So Wilson is $49 million a year. At the time, the only guy that was more was Aaron Rodgers, was at that 50.3 or whatever it was. 165 total, 124 full, 50 million to sign, 73 million first year. That's new money cash. But, what drove that up was you let the Arizona Cardinals jump in front of you and do 46-1 for Kyler Murray with 160 total and 103.3 full. And, in part, that's because the Deshaun Watson deal came in too, which broke the Patrick Mahomes number. Now, the guarantee part didn't matter, but it broke the Mahomes number. And, if you're looking along here on YouTube, the market that existed before the Watson craziness from the Browns are these couple of things I'm highlighting here. It was Patrick Mahomes at 45, Josh Allen at 43, Dak Prescott at 40 million. Derek Carr wasn't there at the time. Kirk Cousins, 35-ish. You had Goff and Wentz were both around 33. That was the market. Once Deshaun Watson broke the Mahomes thing, even though you had Rodgers in there as well, but once Watson broke Mahomes, that just opened the door, and so then you got Kyler Murray, and now it's like, well, you gave up all this for this guy, like you should be pegged in some way, shape, or form to Aaron Rodgers, and that was what they did, and that's really what killed them on this. I think was that delay. If this number was down, to where, for example, Matt Stafford signed in 2022 off a Super Bowl win for $40 million a year, $120 million total guarantee, 63 full. Now I don't remember the time frame when he came in. Maybe April. Was when Stafford did his deal. Wilson got done, I think, in August. So, Stafford kind of came in, and they still, even with Watson breaking through, they still kind of honored this old market with him, where he gets the 120 injury protected, 63 million full. Now he had the 1 year remaining, so the new guarantees on these are a little different. Let me pull up new guarantees. Let me just see how the new guarantees. I'll do apples to apples here. Quarterbacks. So that's Kyler Murray. So Russell Wilson ended up with 73 million new guarantees. So that's 73 million over the money that was in his contract that they brought over from Seattle. So even though those years weren't guaranteed, let's be real, they're, you didn't trade for a guy to not pay him at all. And 114 new. Matt Stafford was 40 million full and 97 full, injury. So apples to apples, new money to new money. It was there's just a huge disparity between these two, and it's that delay on that Kyler Murray thing. It was falling behind him. So that was a timing issue. That's on the Broncos. That's on the general manager. That's it was just a mistake. For that one was just a complete whiff by them. So that's where things stand with them right now. There's still time for things to change. They could still go to Wilson in February or March and say, listen, do you want to be here next year? We'll give you an opportunity to compete. We need to modify your contract. And again, you could do some things with it to make it more reasonable. Just to find some ways to make it work out. So, but otherwise he's going to be some kind of release before that guarantee kicks in. So that's basically the gist of that situation. But don't take that letter by the Players Association and say it's a given that the Broncos were completely 100% in the wrong here. This is something that happens all the time. Now, is it very ethical of teams when they do that? Probably not. But it's that's the way that these contracts work in football, for better or for worse. That's just kind of how they work out. So, that's the decision that the Broncos kind of came to, and it had to be done. I mean, there's no way that you could lock yourself into Wilson as your quarterback for 2025. So, like when people ask me about, well, can we trade the contract? You can't, because I don't think anyone would want to commit to Wilson for 2 years. Now, if Wilson was 30 years old, they might take a shot, even though the contract was structured that way. But I don't see, a team really wanting to take that chance right now with those 2 years like that. Now, the other thing that people have brought up on this, and I just wanted to point this out because it's not entirely correct. So the Denver Broncos will get an offset next year on any salary that Russell Wilson makes that's attributed to 2024. So everyone is saying that, he's going to sign with whatever team, stick it to the Broncos, and he's going to sign for the minimum, which is $1.2 million next year, $1.21 million. Because why would he play for $10 million when all that does is give the Broncos $10 million because of the salary offset? But what you can do, as long as you sign a multiple-year deal, and you can do a multiple-year deal with voids as long as the team is not worried about the compensatory process, what you can do is you can incentivize money in 2025 that is based on 2024 play. And as long as it's not an incentive that's paid for 2024, it should not offset any money for the Broncos. So Wilson can sign a contract that is $1.2 million in 2024, but it has a roster bonus, for example, in 2025 that escalates by $1 million for every game that the team wins and Russell Wilson plays 50% of the snaps. Whatever number, that might be. Let's say that could end up being $10 million or whatever. You can structure it that way to where you would have a legitimate negotiation. This is not just going to be Russell Wilson chooses a team because the salary is the same anywhere he goes. No, this is going to be how can teams get creative to skirt the offsets in a way that makes sense. Now, you're deferring payment. You're deferring the money to 2025. But realistically, you get a lot of your salary deferred now anyway because they pay it out over 36 weeks, I think, instead of the 18. So, there are creative ways to do it because if you do that as like a roster bonus, for example, you could actually have that paid in April. So that it's almost like you'd be getting the money sort of similar timing. So it is not the Russell Wilson revenge tour. I'm going to go sign wherever I want to sign for 1.2. It's how do we get creative to make a contract that works for me to have an opportunity to prove I can still play football and still be a starting quarterback in 2025, but also be compensated at a somewhat fair level in 2024. And I don't know what a fair level would be, but that's something that comes up. But I saw a lot of articles. Oh, he's just playing for 1.2 next year, no matter what. So he'll sign with this team and stick it to Denver, or he's going to sign with this team because they desperately need a quarterback, and now they can fit him under their salary cap. There's a lot more things at play or that can be at play as long as you get creative. And I'm pretty sure that, they'll be able to get creative wherever he goes next year. All right. So I think the next thing I really wanted to go over now was Justin Fields. The Bears are going to get the number one pick in the draft again. This is from the pick that they got from Carolina, and Carolina's in a tough position right now. They're in a bit of a rebuilding state, but the Bears made a pretty good trade, to be able to bring in what they did last year, where basically they, in essence, were saying, okay, we're going to buy an extra year of Justin Fields. See how things go. We're going to bring in for him a top-flight wide receiver in DJ Moore, at least someone that we think is one. Obviously, the Claypool one that they thought was also going to be a top-flight receiver didn't work out. So they brought in Moore, and you bring in all these number one picks where you're like, okay, that gives us, number one, it gives you a possibility to be picking again pretty high in the draft. Right, rookie quarterbacks a lot of times don't perform at a level that's high enough to save you from being a really bad football team the first year. Some do, right? The Texans are playing right now. I'm not watching the game, but they're playing right now for the playoffs. I know they were winning 7-3 in the second quarter. But a lot of times those teams don't do very well in the first year that player is there if he's starting. So it gives you an opportunity for, you would probably say, oh, another top 10 pick next year. You get a future number one and some other picks. That gives you that ammunition that you need without having to use all of your own picks to move forward, right? So where Carolina's got to give up all of their own picks, and now you're looking at it and it's like, man, this is kind of, you have a year where instead of being able to improve your team via the draft, it's a lot harder because a lot of your picks are still going to Chicago. I think it's a number one this year and I think a 2 next year. But anyway, the one this year. So, from Chicago's perspective, you're looking at this like, well, this gives us extra picks to be able to move forward, to move up if we have to take quarterback. As things turn out, they end up with the number one pick. You don't have to give anything. And essentially, they're in the exact same position that they were last year. And for whatever reason, this year, it actually has become much more of a discussion, which I kind of found interesting. Because this is something that I was harping on, last year. Now, this is, to say harping on it last year, this is something I've been talking about for ages. Something I was talking about when the Jets were almost playoff relevant. Really before that, they did have the 2015 where they were sort of relevant. But I started OTC in 2013, and it was probably that first year where I'm sure I put a post out there or something on it where you mentioned where you started to look at the quarterback salaries when you're doing evaluation of the draft, and you're looking at the draft in the current system versus the old system, to where you look at it and you go, there's no reason anymore for a team to not draft multiple quarterbacks. It's the first thing. The second part of it, and I don't know if that would have been that early or if that was a year or two later, one of the first draft articles that I probably wrote, which was the NFL, the way the system has now become. Now, I've probably changed my opinion a little bit on this only because free agency's gotten worse. But when you started to get the salaries that are so high at the quarterback position, right? We've got, again, I'll pull up the quarterback salaries here. Burrow at 55, Herbert at 52, Jackson 52, Hurts 51, Wilson 49, Murray 46, Watson 46. So, you've got these salaries that are that big, and then you drop down to your rookies, and, you've got, let's see, CJ Stroud is, 9? Trevor Lawrence is 9.2. Bryce Young is 9.5. Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, obviously they stink, but, 8.7, 8.5. Anthony Richardson, 8.5. And those salaries, and these are your top picks in the draft, they line up with your backups. Jacoby Brissett, Taylor Heineke, Mitch Trubisky, Tyrod Taylor, who are all in that $5 to $8 million a year range. So the other take that I had during that period of time was, unless you hit a superstar in the draft, meaning, at the time, I would have been talking about getting a guy in the top of the draft that was Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, like that quality of quarterback. I may have mentioned Wilson in there as well, maybe. But unless you got that type of quarterback, your best system for building a football team was kind of just to keep churning those quarterbacks. Like, it didn't make sense to me to say that, okay, there's no middle market. I know there's a couple players now with Geno Smith and Garoppolo, but if there's no mid market, there's no reason for me to be paying Daniel Jones $40 million a year if I can just draft a rookie at like $8 or $9 million. Because the rookie's probably not going to be, now maybe the first year he's going to be worse, but years 2, 3, and 4, he's going to give me a major financial advantage over a player like Daniel Jones at $40 million a year, right? You're talking about an extra $30 million a year that you can spend to better your team. Whether that's on wide receivers, offensive linemen, probably a lot on defense. It's, players that you can acquire in free agency. Now, free agency has changed. In 2015 timeframe, you still got a lot of good players in the free agency. It's less now. So it's a little bit harder to build your teams, get some of those players via free agency. But you can find good players in free agency. It's not like you can't. So my thought was, there's almost no point in extending your quarterback unless you've got a stud. So, if I look at like the players on this list now, I can understand, those top couple of names, why you sign them on those big extensions. But, Russell Wilson wouldn't be there. Kyler Murray wouldn't be there. Deshaun Watson probably shouldn't be there. Based on how he played in Houston, yeah. And I'm taking I'm just trying to look at it from a football perspective here. He had been out of football for too long, in my mind, to do that. Mahomes fine, Allen fine. Everything else, I think it's, you should be thinking about it. Let's put it that way. Jared Goff is a good example. So Jared Goff at 33.5 for the Rams. Now this is going back when contracts were like $35 million was your high paid player, 35, 37. Jared Goff was a little bit of an albatross, I think, for the Rams. But when you look at where he is with the Lions, his numbers are way down because the Lions got him for 4 years here at, about $25 million a year. Now, it's not evenly distributed. It's $10 million the first year I'm talking about on the cap, then 30, 30, 30. But it could have been structured a little bit differently if they wanted to do that. But Jared Goff is a limited quarterback. There's limitations with him, and he's had a terrific year. I'm not taking anything away from him. Part of the reason the Lions are able to do what they've done, in part, is because they do have a quarterback that, even though he has a $34 million contract, from their point of view, it's really only about a $25 million a year deal. And they really didn't have much in the way of sunk costs on that. He had guarantees the first 2 years, I think, of that deal. I think the other years they would have been able to get out of it. So, basically it was half of the price of the top end of the market where it is right now. So, you can look at it, I think, from that respect and say, okay, that's a legitimate mid-tier market deal. But those are very few, and they had to trade themselves into it. The only real mid-tier market deal is Geno Smith's contract. You could throw Garoppolo in there, but I don't think Garoppolo is really very sought after. When he signed at 24. The Geno Smith thing at 25, I think, is a little bit more legitimate. But you can throw Garoppolo in there if you want. Right around $25 million a year. But that's where Goff kind of winds up as well. And that's a market that exists. But Daniel Jones ain't making $25 million a year. He's making 40. Kyler Murray's not making $30 million a year. He's making 46. Now Murray's better than Daniel Jones, but that's kind of the point. Derek Carr, 38. That's not 25. So my thought on it back then was you just keep churning quarterbacks. If you have a quarterback, give him 2 years, then draft if you can. You draft another one at some point in the next few years. So you've always got a player that's in there so you can burn your first quarterback, whether it's franchise tag trade, whether it's compensatory coming back to you, whatever it is, that unless the guy is a superstar, that potential that exists, gives you something. So, like Zach Wilson's awful. Okay, he's arguably the worst quarterback in the NFL. And, the Jets aren't any good, right? We know the Jets stink. But, if the Jets option was stinking with Daniel Jones at 40 or stinking with Zach Wilson at 9. If the Jets weren't so stubborn with the way they handled Wilson, really the last 2 years, with the way they kind of did that backup position, the Jets might have been a 500 football team. And, if they had had a Daniel Jones type at $40 million a year, they probably wouldn't even be that. So, you get a lot of opportunities when you're willing to make those difficult decisions at the quarterback position and start saying, you know what? If the future with you is 40, there is no future. If the future with you is 50, there is no future, because you are not good enough to carry a bunch of crappy players to the playoffs every year. You're just not. So, you should be going in there proactively and saying, we need to do this. And teams do this all the time. That is the kind of stuff that drives you nuts sometimes, because you'll see players at various positions, and people ask, like, and I'll throw a Jets example out again right there. And people will ask about Bryce Huff. Well, is Huff coming back? I have no idea. And then people do ask the question, which is the right one: was Will McDonald the Bryce Huff replacement? It's like, he probably was. You draft somebody to replace somebody, and it happens all the time. You draft players to replace veteran guys, or guys towards the end of a rookie contract that you don't think you're going to keep. Nobody bats an eye when you've got one superstar pass rusher and you draft another guy. Nobody really bats an eye until maybe the next year, when you're like, we're not gonna extend that pass rusher. Or maybe he's very good. You're probably gonna extend a superstar, but someone who's really good, and you're like, yeah, we're good with this guy instead. Nobody bats an eye with that. But when it comes to the quarterback thing, it's like, well, all hell is broke loose if you want to talk about switching the quarterback. Justin Fields, based on how he's played and how the team has done this year, and that's the fun part with Chicago. Chicago's got this momentum going, the good vibes, as they would say. Justin Fields is going to ask for an extension that's probably going to be somewhere between $40 and $45 million a year. Justin Fields right now is never healthy for a full season. 16 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, sacked 39 times in 12 games, completes about 61% of his passes, about 200 yards a game passing. Obviously he can run, and he's dynamic in that sense. But, you got him everything you needed. You got him everything that he needed. And yes, his numbers are up this year over last year, and the vibes are certainly better. But even though you got him more help, and they do need more players there, but even though you got him more help, it's not like Justin Fields exploded as a quarterback. He's better as a passer this year than he was last year. I think they trust him to throw the ball more than they did last year. I think he's settled in somewhat with the offense, but you're not going to win with him at $40 or $45 million a year. So, that brings you back to the question about, you draft somebody. But I did think that it was interesting that more and more people are, buying into it this year. Because last year, everyone just was like, I would bring this up and say, yeah, the Bears should draft a quarterback. Oh, you're an idiot. I mean, that was basically it. That was the response. You're an idiot. Basically the same thing that comes from every Cleveland fan that likes to talk about Njoku. Because I didn't think that was a good contract. Nobody came out of the woodworks last year. But this year, everyone's out of the woodworks on that one. Hey, you're wrong sometimes, but you don't take victory laps when you're right. And I don't really see the purpose when, getting beat up like that when you're wrong either. But I don't even know if it's wrong. It's a season. But whatever. Back to Fields here. Last year, that was the thing. It was like, you're a moron. Justin Fields is good. He just needs players. And I don't think Justin Fields was worse this year. I think he was better. But, I mean, if your expectation was you needed a year for him to prove he could be a superstar, okay, yeah, he's not a superstar. But, you possibly could have wasted an opportunity to get a great quarterback in Stroud last year. Now, I don't know if that's who they would have selected. They might have selected Young, who was terrible this year. He still might be really good. And I put something out there this week on Twitter and got a lot of good feedback on it. And some of it was you're an idiot. But, you got good feedback from, smarter people. Like, Kevin Cole mentioned that, he thought part of it was that the quarterbacks this year are better in the draft. Williams, I guess, is the main guy. But the only thing that I would say on that is I don't hear, but maybe there's a reason people bring it up, but I don't hear in any of the arguments that I'm hearing online, like on the NFL programming or anything else, I don't hear the arguments like, this is a once-in-a-generation talent that you take. I haven't heard that at all. And it wasn't like last year that it was, these quarterbacks aren't good, you're an idiot. It's just you're an idiot. So it wasn't like last year that it was a question of the prospects aren't good enough. If you're picking number one overall, I would imagine that any prospect that was going to be taken number one overall was going to be a higher rated prospect than Justin Fields was as a quarterback. That would just be my guess. If Fields went 15 or so, where did he get picked? 11th. He got 11th. Now I know some people had him, higher on the board. Thought he would go a little bit higher, but I would imagine that most of those players would have graded out, higher. But the concept of it, and maybe this is where you get into being overconfident in your own evaluations. Like, Trevor Lawrence is not a generational quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is a really good NFL quarterback, I think. But he's not this once-in-a-lifetime, player comes along every 15 years kind of guy. And that was what the thought was when he came out. Patrick Mahomes was not the first quarterback taken. Josh Allen was not the first quarterback taken. The fact is, the scouts in the NFL do a tremendous job of, and not just in the NFL, the people who, rank draft prospects, for, the work that they do. Not necessarily NFL scouting, but, on the periphery and the media or whatever. The identification of first-round talent is typically pretty good. There's guys, obviously, who fall through the cracks, especially quarterback. You do see that from time to time. But they do a very good job of identifying first-round talent. Nobody has cracked the code, and this goes for every position. Nobody has cracked the code to say that this guy is going to be a bust, this guy is going to be a star. What they've done is they're able to identify a lot of the traits that make you a good quarterback in the NFL, great quarterback in the NFL. But they really haven't figured out, nobody has, how do you crack the code to where you can look at this and say, okay, Zach Wilson has this trait, this one, those are all great, ain't going to work. Doesn't work with them. None of that is there. So you do a good job in identifying guys that should get drafted. Don't do a good job in identifying, in that subset of groups of players, the guys who you probably want to steer away from. So with that in mind, the concept of it is no different last year to this year, because there's no certainty that any of these players this year are going to be any different than the ones last year. The difference would be if you had a year where there, wasn't a quarterback taken. The difference would be, I can understand the argument if you had a year where the projections are like the first quarterback off the board is going to come somewhere between 10 and 15, somewhere between 10 and 20. Then I understand it. But when the projections are that there's a couple of quarterbacks being taken like top 5, that tells you that there's enough of a consensus that somewhere in here is a good quarterback. And I know quarterbacks can get overdrafted because of the importance of the position. But in general, that's what that tells you. Getting wrapped up in the individual player is, in my mind, kind of nonsense. There's only been a handful of guys that I think have really lived up to that. Peyton Manning, John Elway. I'm sure there's a couple other guys, that have gotten that kind of, hype. Like Carson Palmer got a lot of hype. Carson Palmer was a really, really, really good quarterback. He was not like a once-in-a-lifetime quarterback. Eli Manning certainly wasn't. David Carr certainly wasn't. Jamarcus Russell certainly wasn't. Matt Ryan was never talked about that way. Just trying to go through the players here. Matt Stafford was not a once-in-a-lifetime player. I wouldn't put Andrew Luck in that category. Some would, and they would just say that, whatever reason it didn't pan out. His heart wasn't in it, got too hurt, and just didn't want to keep going. Possibility. But a lot of the guys who've been the best guys are those guys that slip a little bit. So the point is just that from a philosophical standpoint, if you're willing to have the discussion, you should have been willing to have the discussion last year, and you should be willing to have it this year. I don't see the difference between the two. And if you're that wrapped up in one prospect, I just bring you back to all those quarterbacks who busted that have been the top pick in a draft. So, I think you got to keep that in mind. I don't think there is an issue with having the 2 quarterbacks next year. And I think that's the thing that drives me kind of the nuts the most. And, and I don't remember who it was. It was on from NFL Network. Someone finally said it. I was like, whoa, I got to repost this one. That it was like, I don't see the issue with having Justin Fields and a rookie. I don't either. And I understand that there might be some angst in the Chicago locker room. And, I think the players in Chicago love Justin Fields. And I think unlike some other teams, Chicago does have a lot of guys who are going to be back next year. They're going to be part of, what they're hoping to rebuild. But number one, players like winning. You like to maximize your opportunities to win. Number two, the whole locker room stuff nowadays is pretty overblown because guys just don't stick around long enough. But there's no reason if you can be Kansas City with Alex Smith, who I'm sure was liked by people and would constantly get him to the playoffs and consistently be a adequate regular season quarterback. There was no split over the fact that Alex Smith was, now being backed up by a rookie. And the rookie was going to sit for a year, and then odds are it was going to be his job after that. Alex Smith didn't have a problem with it. Now, Alex Smith had gotten paid already. Justin Fields has not. But there's no reason to think that wouldn't be the case. Now, would I pick up Justin Fields' option? I think the answer is no. I think some people ask me about that. The reason that I would say no is I sell the franchise tag at my disposal. While the franchise tag is a lot more money, probably an extra 13 million or so. I'd rather not be locked in on like 20 million, and be Blake Bortles, that kind of situation. Where you've got a lousy player and you're locked in on it. I'd rather just say, well, I'll franchise tag him. Rather than being locked in on the option. I think that they'll opt into him. That's my opinion as to what they will do. If they were to go with a 2 quarterback system, I think they would look at that and say, well, if we pick up his option, that'll kind of make it look like we're still with him too, and it'll minimize any hurt feelings and give us an extra year of a little bit lower salary to work with. But I think I would not do it. I would just play the tag out after that, if he happens to develop. And that's the other thing. Even though you get into the aspect of, how expensive the quarterbacks are, you can use those franchise tags and still field a decent team around that player. So really, you do have, even beyond that rookie contract, but the rookie contract is really where you want to do that churn and burn kind of scenario. But, I think that doing the 2 quarterbacks next year, I think makes sense. You give him an opportunity. You give the locker room the opportunity to say, this is the guy we want to play with. And, you give the opportunity to see if Chicago can sink or swim. I don't think Fields gets you back enough in a trade to where you just say, no, we don't need him. Again, he's improved a little bit. And, maybe can take that next step to where you would say, all right, he can be an elite level player. So I wouldn't completely rule it out. So I wouldn't give up on him. I would just say, let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot with him. We believe we're a playoff team with Justin Fields. So we're going to give it a try. See how things go. And then we've got this other kid that's going to be here. He'll have all of training camp. He'll have all the regular season to win the players over, probably the way Mahomes did, by getting on the field in practice and saying, this guy might be special. We love Justin, but, maybe this guy's pretty good too. And, that starts to kind of calm down some of those concerns. Teams have to start thinking outside the box with this stuff. Buying into this concept that that Trent Dilfer teams exist anymore is stupid. Number one, Trent Dilfer type contracts don't exist. If you are a quarterback who wins a Super Bowl, you look at someone like Nick Foles. What did Nick Foles get? 20. What did Nick Foles get? Let me look up Nick Foles' contract history. Let's see. Nick Foles signed with the Jaguars. So first he got a raise, I know, with the Eagles to like 20. 14.5 was like 20. So he signed for 22 million a year, 45 guaranteed. That was probably at a time when the market, 2019. Let's say 30 million a year. Let's see. Maybe I'm off on that. Where's contract history? Trends. Contract history. Where am I at here? Let me just see where the market was in 2019. $35 was your top market. That came a little later. $33.5. So 2/3 of the top of the market, is what he signed for. And I mean, Foles was a pure journeyman quarterback. But that's where that went. I doubt I have like a Trent Dilfer or Brad Johnson. anywhere in here to just see where they were at for, let's see. I doubt I have that. Yeah. Sometimes I'll look up some old deals and put them in. Yeah, I don't have those kind of deals here, but I can guarantee you it's a lot less than, like a Nick Foles made. And the game has just changed. We get into this thing like, oh, if you just had this and you've got this great deep, like, how many times do I have to hear the Jets have a Super Bowl defense? There's like 15 teams that have a Super Bowl defense. You don't need a great defense to, get to the Super Bowl. You're not going to get through the regular season most years with a great defense and so-so quarterback play. It's very hard to do. You can do it once in a while. And it's possible then that maybe that defense can carry you through a couple rounds of the playoffs. But, it's very hard to do that style of football. It's very difficult. The teams that consistently get to the playoffs are those teams that have the great quarterbacks. It's not the teams that have a great defense. It's not the teams that have a okay team with an okay quarterback. It's the teams that have a great quarterback. Now, question is, when you get the great quarterback, what can you fill, around them? This is one of the reasons why, as you go through the Super Bowl histories, a lot of times you will find that your Super Bowl champions in the modern NFL time frame are players on rookie contracts or players on the front end of an extension. Because on the front end of the extension, which kind of runs concurrent with that rookie contract, right? We're overwriting that rookie contract, but putting those numbers in there. You've got these really artificially low salary cap numbers relative to the new money value on that contract. Those are the teams that typically are winning the Super Bowl. Obviously, the big exception in the last 15, 20 years or so is Brady. And Brady had a lot of below market attributes in some of his contracts there. So, Chicago's got to take all those things into account. So should all these teams, not just Chicago, but Chicago would be stupid, I think, to just, this is a gift they got. And they'd be insane to not accept the gift. Be insane. You can trade down again, but, you're not going to get as good of a return. And you're going to reach a point where if you need to wait to see that Justin Fields is not the guy, like the Jets with Zach Wilson, right? The Jets have gone down this Zach Wilson rabbit hole. Like, yeah, if Rodgers gets hurt, we're good with Zach Wilson. Like, they've gone through that rabbit hole for 3 years now. Because they just don't want to admit they made a mistake. You get to the point where your mistake is so big, you don't have an opportunity to fix it because you might not get another shot at getting in the, a top 5 pick in the draft. You don't get that opportunity, and that's where you get into these situations where, you're trading for the Russell Wilsons of the world. You're trading for an Aaron Rodgers. You're trading for Matt Stafford. And, obviously Stafford worked out tremendously well. But, you get to the point where you're making trades. And it's like, if you need to look at anything, and I know they extended him, you can argue pros and cons or whatever of it. Look at what the Eagles did when the Eagles drafted the quarterback at the top part of the second round, Jalen Hurts, right? They gave themselves that situation to just quickly move on from what ended up being a broken quarterback in Carson Wentz. You look at what the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers. You look at what the Packers did with Jordan Love. It gives you an opportunity to quickly go from your superstar to somebody who maybe can be a star. And you don't really miss a beat. Now, Rodgers missed a little bit at the beginning, a different league at that point in time. But, the point is, if you have the players ready to slide in, you don't go through the disaster period of having to rip apart a team and desperately try to come up with a way to get a quarterback. And that's what's going to end up happening with Chicago if they want to play this out, to just wait and say, okay, now Fields has proved that he can't be the quarterback. Let's go find somebody. It's like you had an opportunity in 2022, or 2023. You had an opportunity in 2024. You can't just expect another opportunity in 25 or 26 or whenever that, might be. So you got to go in there and do that. So I think Chicago would be nuts to not do it. But I am kind of glad to see more and more people kind of joining in on this. I was going to go over the young player snaps. This is something I did the other week, but I'm going to hold off on that because this is going on for a while. I don't think I have that many questions, but let's do a Q&A. Let me go get another drink, and we'll do a Q&A in just a second. All right, I guess Jacob has made his way down to play Fortnite here, so hopefully he'll be quiet. We've got headphones on that one, so he got a PlayStation for Christmas, so he's doing that. So, all right, let's go to some questions here. Sorry if I miss anything, because I may have gotten something the Christmas week that I could have missed. Hopefully I got most of this stuff. All right, morning, Jason. This is from Josh. I'm from Australia. Enjoy your podcast, your deep insights into the breakdown of the contracts and what they are actually worth. Enjoy your opinion towards approaching the draft from a team perspective with heavy analytics in there. Been a Patriots fan since I started watching in the early 2000s, and I've been spoiled by their greatest, over that time. Saying that, looking forward to the rebuilding process. What were your thoughts from a team side and your contract analytics side of drafting a quarterback at the top of the first round and then drafting a second quarterback in the second round? I'd love to send you a variety beer package from one of our great smaller breweries in Australia, Black Ops. That'd be cool. I don't know how I could actually get that here, but that'd be pretty awesome. But, it'd certainly be better than the Ultras, I'm sure. Anyway, I think, despite all the stuff that I just went over, I don't think that I would do that. I don't think I would go 1-2. I don't think I would. I'd have to think about that a little bit. I think what Washington did that 1 year, it's like the only time to give Washington credit for something, is when they went first round and then I think it was fourth round for Cousins. I think that's probably the the better way to do that. I think would be to do something like that than doing the 1-2. But I'd have to think about that. From a contract perspective, it's not a big deal as long as you were not going to have a veteran on your roster that first year. Because, again, the salaries are so low. Your second-round player, if you're projecting him to be a backup quarterback, that's a good situation to have. But I think, I don't know, part of me would just say that I would probably go like 1-4 if you were going to do two quarterbacks in 1 year. I think that's probably what you would do because I feel like a lot of teams would want a veteran to be behind the rookie. So I guess you could do that with a 1-2 and then a third. I think that would end up being weird even for the veteran player. And that might lead to a little bit of complaining. So I don't know, that it's an interesting thought. Because I wouldn't mind taking first rounders back to back. So I don't know. I'd have to really give this one a little bit more thought. My first inkling would actually be no on this, but I wouldn't be totally against it. I have to think on that one. Let's see. This is from Richard. What would be the best approach for the Browns to handle the Watson contract and cap hits moving forward? What's the least painful approach? It's Haslam being an owner who's willing to pay cash bonuses by converting money into signing bonuses help here. No, I don't think anything helps here. Watson comes with tons and tons and tons of baggage, right? And, that contract is not good because the whole thing is guaranteed. Let's pull up Watson's deal here just to throw it on the screen if you're watching along. Watson is owed $46 million a year, 24, 25, 26. So even if they ate 46 for next year, if they ate all of that, you're still on the hook for $92 million. And all the baggage that comes along with them. So this, to me, this would be a situation where you are trading either problem for a problem, kind of contract wise, or you are basically going to give somebody draft picks. But I think the draft picks are probably, especially when you look at the what they gave up to bring in Watson, the draft picks are probably more valuable to Cleveland than the wasted cap space. I think you got by with Flacco this year. You're not going to get another option at that next year. Flacco's not going to be $1 million, to play for you next year. I don't even know Flacco. Flacco's done a couple of games here. It's a fun story, but I mean, it's a couple of games. I don't know if you would find that again. I would think that the Browns' best option, and they're probably not going to do it. And I'd have to even look to see what picks they have. Their best option is to draft a quarterback. If you draft a quarterback and your guy competing with Watson is playing for $3 million a year, say it's a late first, early second, or something like that, those numbers offset at that point. It's like, yeah, you're still in deep on the quarterback position, but your numbers aren't going to be as bad overall because you've got a rookie who's bringing that money down. And if you look historically, the teams that have had some salary cap issues, Seattle was sort of there a little bit, but, Dallas would be the big one. Dallas got out of their salary cap issues because Dak Prescott was like on a contract that probably averaged like $800,000 a year, which let them get out of some contracts that they probably shouldn't have done. When you look at those couple of guys who get drafted late, for example, San Francisco, say what you will about Purdy, they've gotten by a lot simply because of him. Like, that let them deal with the fallout with the Garoppolo stuff. Not that was that expensive. And, there's still the hit that comes from Trey Lance is ongoing, right? It's not so much a financial thing. It's more all the draft picks you gave up, to bring him in. But he offsets a lot of that because you got a functional player at that same position. Like, it would be a completely different thing if, let's say they drafted, let's say Nick Bosa was the last pick in the draft. You'd say, well, they got a $35 million edge player with the last pick. That offsets Trey Lance. It doesn't offset Trey Lance and giving up all those first round picks. This does a little bit. So I think in the Browns case, if I'm the Browns, I think you are in a position where you're taking a quarterback, a developmental prospect, second round, third round, fourth round, wherever you got picks, every year for the next couple of years until you find your starting quarterback. Because I think at this point, Watson is done. I don't think Watson is going to be your starting, like, high-level quarterback at all. He can be caretaker. He can be there. But I think the days of Deshaun Watson being a game-changing quarterback are probably gone. So if I'm them, I'm drafting a quarterback, and I'm just going to ride out whatever this contract is. Maybe you can find somebody to trade for it in the final year if you eat a lot of the money. But I think that's how you got to handle it. Logan has a Kirk Cousin question. I don't know if this is for the podcast or not, but we'll answer it here. My question clarification is in regards to Kirk Cousins' expiring contract. On the OTC website, it says it voids on March 15th. Just curious if this is before or after the beginning of the league year. I've seen it reported the league starts March 13th. Main questions are about the void years in the deal. Is it accurate that the Vikings are to sign him to another extension? They're able to move the dead money from the void years around more. However, if they don't extend him, the dead money, sorry, my contacts are going here, is then guaranteed to be paid out in the current void structure from 24 to 27. So I guess the first thing would be, and they'd get a compensatory pick, so I don't anticipate them doing this. What you saw were a couple of teams, like it was the Saints with, now Lattimore's for a trade. They restructured Lattimore's contract to basically open the possibility of trading him. So what they did is they converted his salary to an option bonus that's due in the summertime. So they have time to try to trade him while also bringing his cap number down. So they didn't want to restructure him. They wanted to have the ability to trade. They modified Jameis Winston's contract so they could June 1 him. Ravens did it with Odell Beckham. Couple of teams did this to be able to June 1 a player. They had until today to do it with Cousins. I doubt they would have done that. But, the way Kirk Cousins' contract works, his contract voids on the last day of the league year. So, I usually put these dates in based on whatever the league year is, the time I put them in. And off the top of my head, I don't know if the league year begins on the 13th, 15th, but basically, free agency kicks off that day, whatever time it is. He becomes a free agent. His contract voids out on that same day. So it's not after the new league year starts. So basically the way that it works is if his contract voids and they don't sign him to an extension, they'll take a cap hit of $28.5 million. If they sign him to an extension, the prorated money that you see on his salary cap page of $10.25 million for 2024 stays in 2024, but the money that you see in 25, 26, 27, which accelerates to be the 28.5, those stay in those league years. So they can extend him, and let's say they sign him to whatever the value is, but let's say they gave him a $40 million signing bonus, and the minimum salary for next year, he would basically have a cap hit of around like $22 million. So they would actually bring his cap number down next year by extending him. But yeah, it allows those prorated numbers to stick in those years versus hitting the acceleration that gets on the 28.5. And that's probably something that I should mention. So for all the contracts that you see on OTC that have void years, we put those contracts, unless we know it's going to be a post-June 1 designation, we put those contracts in there as if it's going to void, because that's the most accurate way to represent the team's salary cap space for the next year. When numbers get leaked from the management council, or I guess the Players Association, but probably more the management council, that kind of gets thrown out there, they're going to count Kirk Cousins at a cap hit of like 10.25, which is in no way, shape, or form accurate. So you might hear a cap space number that comes out and someone's going to say official numbers by the NFL. And let me just pull up where I have them for 2024 right now. I have the Vikings right now at cap room of $37.29 million. There could very easily be a post that would be something that says the Vikings' official cap space next year is $55 million. And people are going to say, wait a minute. How could this be 55 and you're saying 37? Well, the reason is I'm counting Kirk Cousins' contract as voiding. So that's going to be one of the things that happens when you hear numbers that someone says are coming direct from the management council, the Players Association, that they're taking those contracts as if they do not void. 90% of the time, those contracts void out. All right. I'll also try to write an email to that one. Let's see. Brandon, rollover confusion. Okay, so yeah, so I've seen this too. And I guess we probably should put this maybe on here somewhere on the page. So the numbers for 2024 do include the rollover that we estimate right now. That'll change. There's still a couple days left, day or two left in the season. We'll update the rollover numbers at that point, and then I'll make some estimated adjustments. Those won't be official. They're remotely official. I'll get the official carryover numbers next week, I think. But yeah, we probably should mention that on here. These cap space numbers do include the rollover that we project from 2023. So yeah, that's a good point. That we should put that there. Okay, let's see. Tulane competition. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make that work. Okay, Mark. Way back before the 2006 CBA extension, there were reports that said if the extension were not passed, there was no way for the Redskins to get under the cap. Do you remember that? I wonder if that wasn't really true, but more like the Saints' current status where they couldn't get under the cap by releasing players, but would have had to extend players. Yeah, I don't remember that. But, the Washington was so screwed up at that point in time. I mean, I guess stuff is probably... They still probably had Deion Sanders maybe on the books at that point. No, I don't know if that was the case. So, as CBAs come to a close, sometimes there's wacky rules that come into play. Probably less so now than there were in the past. I don't remember at that point in time. I wouldn't have been paying that close attention to it. I remember it. But I wouldn't have been paying that kind of attention to it to say that there wasn't a way to do it. Now, it may have been that they would have had to have gotten creative in a way that was not normal for that point in time. With void structures and all that, where that stuff was not the norm at all. That all built off of like rookie contracts and some different things. So my assumption, and here's another thing, and I give myself a little pat on the back for it. I really believe that everyone as a whole that discusses and talks about the NFL is much, much, much more knowledgeable on contracts now than they were in 2006 or 2005. I think that there's a much better understanding of it. I feel like we're a little part of that. That is a reason for that happening between the book, the website, the discussions that we have with people just explaining stuff as to how things work and ways that you can manipulate numbers and what those numbers actually mean. That there's a lot more meaningful discussion, and there's a lot better understanding of what contracts are now than what it was, 15, 20 years ago. So I have a feeling that's probably, if that was discussed back then, that's probably what it was, kind of what you're talking about there, where it was a situation like the Saints, and people just look at that and go, yeah, there's no way for them to do it. But I think that's probably what it is. All right, here is next one. Let's take a look here. Nope, this is from Logan again. This might be the same exact question. Okay, so this is the same question about Kirk Cousins. So yes, it was indeed, ended up being a podcast question. So, all right, good. So hopefully you listened this week, Logan, and you got that answer in there as to how that works. And that applies to any void contract that you see there. If the players extended, the voids will change. The numbers will change. Michael, overall question about the Saints. Shouldn't they be looking to June 1 a couple players to try at least partially dig out of the hole? Michael Thomas has to be at June 1. No way they can possibly extend him again based on his play lack of availability. Yeah, so I can't imagine Michael Thomas. So right now they're maxed out. You're allowed 2 post June 1 designations. So the Saints structured Michael Thomas's contract to be a post June 1. Now they did this last year, and then at the last minute they changed their mind and they signed him to an extension, incentive laden extension. I don't think that'll happen this time. It's possible they could have done a small modification. He has a roster bonus that he earned. How much is that worth? Like 1.9 million. And they could convert that, but I think they would have had to do that today. 2.2 million is the roster bonus. Is that right? I thought it was less than that. But it's 2.2. But his contract at the moment is set up to be a post June 1 designation. So his is one of those where if he's on the roster on the second day of the league year, you have to be a post June 1 designation, you have to be on the roster on the first day of the league year. So if he's on the roster on the second day of the league year, he gets like $50 million in the future guaranteed, fully guaranteed. So they don't have a choice but to cut him. Jameis Winston's contract is the same now too. So those are their 2 post June 1 designations. So for Michael Thomas, they will defer $9 million of future cap hits. Yeah, they'll defer $9 million with him. For Winston, they deferred $7 million. With him by doing that restructure, because he was originally going to count for about 10.7. Now he's only going to count for 4.6, and then that'll eventually drop to 3.4. After June 1st. So, they defer that 7-3 dead to the next year. And then what they did with Lattimore, they took Lattimore's salary down to the minimum. I don't remember what it was off the top of my head. They probably saved about $10 million. I think I put it in his notes. Let me see here. $11 million. They saved $11 million in 2024, and they still keep their ability to trade him while also having him at that lower cap figure. So yeah, that's what they've done so far. So they're certainly working on it. They're certainly working on it. Whatever they can do. But you're limited in the amount of post June 1 designations that you can do. All right, let's go to Twitter here. I'll be back on the video front. Yeah, I guess we'll grab another Ultra. All right, let me drop down to the bottom here. All right, give me a second. We're going to grab one more drink and then call it a night, I think. I honestly can't believe how many of these Ultras I had floating around. I think this is the last one. This is a Ultra Gold. I have no idea when I even bought this one. So, yeah. I guess my wife will be happy that all these are out of the fridge now. So, and they'll be replaced by some new stuff that's better. All right. All right, Twitter. The Chiefs window, this is Tampa Forever. The Chiefs window is Mahomes and Reed. Reed is getting older, may retire soon. If the Chiefs decide to go all in over the next few years, what contracts could be restructured to open tons of cap room to bring in impact players? So I don't think the Chiefs are ever going to be that kind of spending team. That's just my opinion here. If you're looking at, when you work in the NFL nowadays, you're pretty much working in 2-year windows. So, most of these players that you're talking about aren't even going to be on the roster. Just looking at it, you've got Mahomes that you can restructure. I'll just put the restructure thing here. Next year, you'd open up $35 million by restructuring Mahomes for next year. Kelsey is probably going to retire yet. Kelsey, they're going to have a discussion about the Taylor Swift version of Travis Kelsey is not very good. And he's looking like Gronkowski at the end at this point. You can open up 8 with Tooney, Taylor. You can open up 12. But I mean, if you're really talking about the future, you're looking at 2025, and in 2025, I mean, other than Mahomes, where you restructure him, you open up 39 million that year. I mean, Kelsey's going to be gone. The guard will be extended. Taylor will probably be gone. And that's it. It's just a bunch of rookies at that point. The NFL is no longer... The NFL used to be something that you would look at, and you would look at 3-year windows, and a lot of that 3-year windows was a lot of veteran players. It's not that anymore. It's basically 2 years at the most. A lot of times it's really 1 year. You basically expect most of the time... I remember doing that study on it. I think you turn over 30 or 40% of your roster every year. Now, obviously, that's not going to be the veterans, but you're just not that deep in on these contracts anymore. You look at free agency; it's rare to do a 5-year contract. Most contracts in free agency are 4 or 3 years. So if you're doing 4-year and 3-year deals, you're not really looking at the future. So I mean, your future in 2025, this is your roster: Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, who's not going to be there, Joe Tooney, Juwan Taylor, Trent McDuffie. I mean, Sky Moore is on the team. I'm just seeing who's even here. I mean, I barely even know half of these guys. Rashee Rice will still be there. You're looking at a roster of 23 players, and that includes a couple voids that'll be gone, 22, 21, 20 guys. Of which most of them are under a $2 million cap hit. So there is no long term in the NFL anymore. There just isn't. I mean, of the contracts that exist now, it's probably just restructuring Patrick Mahomes and probably extending Tooney, but everything else, I mean, it's just the nature of the NFL right now. You are just constantly changing your roster and moving it around and moving it over, and you're working in 1 and 2 year windows. You're not working in those long-term windows anymore. So if Reed leaves, I mean, the roster is basically an open slate. It's basically going to be players you sign this year in free agency. Otherwise it's pretty much open. From a cap space perspective, I mean, right now the Chiefs relative to everybody else would be middle, like the low part of the middle of the league. But I mean, what difference does it make? I mean, other than a couple of these teams that are a little invested in those older players, I mean, it is what it is. It's just all however many rookies, and do you have a quarterback on a big contract? I mean, that's basically it. Shoes, if you were advising a potential 2nd or 3rd round pick in the draft, what factors would lead you saying or going? How much no money would they need to stay? I think you need a lot. The second round is going to get 2 years of salary guarantees. So, I mean, that's pretty solid. Your 3rd round pick is going to get a signing bonus of, probably, I'm not going to look it up, but probably like $1 million signing bonus. And realistically, their first year salary is guaranteed. Very rarely does a 3rd round pick get cut. So, I mean, you'd be looking at $1.8 million that you were going to earn this year. Plus you get that clock ticking in the event that you can, get a free agent contract sometime thereafter. So, I mean, I think if you're going to get picked in the 3rd round, I would think that you would need something like, you'd probably need $2 million to stay. I don't think it would make sense for you to not stay. the deeper you get into the draft, the more you can start really having that discussion. But I think when you're a top 3 round pick, that money's got to be pretty big to make it worthwhile. People's Champ, do you think we will ever see a quarterback take a friendly deal tied to percentage of the cap, where the salary increases, the cap increases? Feels like too many holes that can't be filled. New mega deals that are now being signed. No, I don't think so, because you've got a couple of things. So number one, the teams wouldn't want to do that because they don't want to have that kind of fluctuation that could possibly come with the cap numbers, with the players. So, I think they'd be a little hesitant because of that. Now, obviously, you could restructure and change some stuff, to bring those numbers down a little bit. But I don't think that you would see that. I think what the teams like is having some type of cost certainty. Like right now, Patrick Mahomes at 45 million when the rest of the market's at 50. I mean, that's really good for the Chiefs. So I don't think that the teams would really be agreeable to doing that. I think that they would, kind of like it this way. And, I think even if you saw some teams do that, I think players would still get unhappy with the deals, and try to modify stuff. But I don't think so. I think the benefit for a team on a quarterback contract is for the contracts that work out, if you can convince those players to take a longer term deal, the way that Josh Allen did, the way that Patrick Mahomes did, or if you get in really early, that not that the Rams are probably happy with the Jared Goff, but like the Jared Goffs where you got in after 3 years, and so your extensions are 6-7 years in length. That can be something too. But that's really what it is. It's getting in at a market price, that 2 to 3 years from now looks like a bargain, and you can be locked into that contract for another 3 years. Baba, Taysom Hill contract plus what happens with Dak. So Prescott, I think right now you're just going to wait to see how the season completely plays out. But obviously he's going to shoot for probably like $60 million a year. Probably won't get it, but probably get an extension of like 55 a year or something like that. Taysom Hill, I don't know. Let's see. I don't even know what his contract is looking like these days. It's just such a silly contract. So Taysom Hill next year has a cap charge of 15.8 million, 16.9 million dead to cut him. They'll restructure him. So they will save about 6.6. They'll save a little more than that because they'll add an extra void year. Right now, they can prorate over 4. Does Nick have the extension option here? Yeah, so they'll save about 7 million. Is what they'll do. So they'll save 7 million by adding that extra void year and dropping his salary down to the minimum. So yeah, what a disaster of a contract. All right, let's go back here. All right, Joe, Chiefs fan. What wide receivers have a chance to be cut for cap help this offseason? Cooper Allen, Mike Williams. Cooper will not be. Keenan Allen could be. Mike Williams could be. Mike Williams coming off injury. So I would say, you're not really going to be that interested. Keenan Allen's pretty old. I think the question with him is, how many games are you going to get from him, and will you get him in, the playoffs, or will he be hurt? I think those are the kind of questions that, you have to ask. Cap casualties. We probably have the transactions table updated. Let me look at wide receiver contracts. I'm just going to look at a couple guys that have big numbers in 24. Let's see if anything jumps out at me. Diggs? What's Diggs' dead money? 31 dead. Man, they're in tough shape with that. Cut him as a post-June one. I'll tell you what. If there was a player to June 1, man, the Bills should redo that guy's contract and tell him he'll be free. There's something there that just doesn't mesh, and it seems like he's back on the outs again. I don't know. I would maybe they can get something to trade. Tyler Lockett's probably a possibility to be cut. I think Terry McLaurin will be available in a trade. Christian Kirk is probably okay where he's at. Any of the Broncos guys might be available or cut. Valdez Scantling should get cut. That's for certain. But I don't think you're keeping him, right? You're going to cut him to re-sign him. Steelers, Johnson? Probably not. I think those are the names as you look through there. I mean, Hunter Renfrow, Michael Gallup, but that's not the kind of players I think you're talking about here. I think you're looking at like some of these bigger name guys. So I think those are the guys that you might want to talk about there. Steven, we talk about MVP. I want to focus on the V. What is the most valuable position? You can't say a rookie quarterback. I would argue it's not quarterback unless you have a top 5 guy because of the amount of money that they cost. Yeah, so, I mean, there's two ways to look at that. So, one, obviously, is the impact that you see on the field. And, yes, the most valuable, no matter what, I think what a quarterback brings you at 50 is probably more than, Nick Bosa brings you at 35. I think that's the case. I think even still, I think that's true. But I think you're right, where you're getting into it where if you're not a legitimate top 5 player, but you still have a top, 10, 15 contract, like the Daniel Jones thing I'm talking about before. Yeah, there's no value in that. You're a negative value at that point. So I mean, if you want to take those top quarterbacks, if you want to take those top quarterbacks out, I don't know what it would be. I don't know. I'd have to really think of that. If you want to take the quarterbacks out of the equation, and argue that, unless you have one of those star quarterbacks, it's not really worthwhile. That's an interesting question then. As to where do you gain the most value? Because, I think if you look at teams that get hot in the playoffs, I think a team that probably has these dynamic pass rushers, might stand out as being tremendous value, in very meaningful games. But, some of those guys are pretty expensive, too. I think that's probably where I would lean. Would probably be there. I'd really have to give this one a little bit more thought as to where you would say is where are you kind of getting that most bang for the buck? What brings you the value? But I think the thing is the quarterback, when you're talking about it, you are looking at guys who are top 5 players. And those top players justify those salaries pretty much whatever they are. Because of the value that they bring, each and every week. But yeah, you could, as a whole, I think the quarterback position is overvalued because there's no hierarchy to it. It's just you make a bunch of money or you don't, or you're Geno Smith. I mean, that's basically the quarterback system. 1912, is there a scenario where the Bills move on from Diggs this offseason? Based on cost, do you think the Packers keep Dillon or Jones? Do they start fresh with someone new? All right, so lots of questions here. So let's go one by one. So, yeah, I think Diggs is a possibility. I was obviously just talking about that. But I'm looking at those numbers. Unless he did something today, it would probably have to be a trade. Otherwise he's going to be there. So, but I think it's a definite possibility. If they don't beat Miami and they don't make the playoffs, I think they have to. Maybe the Jaguars could lose and they could still get in. But if they don't make the playoffs, or if they just do a one and done in the playoffs and he doesn't really do well in that game, I think that's going to be a situation that's going to be very hard for Buffalo next year, and they'll probably have to look to trade him. But looking at those numbers, it's going to be very hard for them to do anything but trade him, unless they modified his contract to say, listen, you want out, let's do something that works for everybody, and let's just move on here. Based on cost, do you think the Packers keep Dillon or Jones, or do they start fresh? They should start fresh. It would be idiotic to keep either of those two players. I don't care what they cost. Just move on and get somebody younger, newer, and probably better. Is Amari Cooper a candidate to get a new contract? I think they'll be fine keeping him on it, right? He's got 1 year left. 1 or 2. Amari Cooper. He signed, I think, a 5-year with Dallas. Played 2 there. It's been 2 here. Okay. He's a possibility to get an extension, I would guess. I would let him play it out. He's going to be 30 years old. I'd play it out and see what happens, but I could understand if he gets a new deal. So I it's a possibility. How do the Saints get out of cap hell? Lots of restructuring. Put yourself in cap hell in 2025 to get through 2024. Steven, what does restructuring a contract do for the player and team? Who does it benefit, and why would they do it? Can you just keep restructuring forever? Ala Mahomes. Yeah, you pretty much can. So the team typically puts clauses, in the contracts that state, that they have the right but not the obligation to, convert any salary that's in the contract to bonus money. So basically what it does is it's a short-term benefit for the team because you're opening up cap room in the current league year. It might be a negative in the future because you're putting an equal amount of additional cap hits in every year thereafter for the player, and when you're getting into those void years, you're really upping those charges that might hit your salary cap when the player is set to become a free agent. For a player, it really doesn't make too much of a difference. In many ways, it actually makes it better for the player because it makes him harder to cut in the future. Like we were talking about at Taysom Hill, it's like he's on the roster, he's $15 million. He's off the roster, he's $16 million. You probably are going to keep him on the roster simply because you can't afford to lose cap room on a cut. So that's really where that benefit comes from, on the player end. But yeah, you can pretty much restructure as long as you want, and there's teams that do that with certain players. The Chiefs have been a little bit more safe with Mahomes, but there's definitely teams that do that. A couple more questions from 1912. What kind of deal do you see Cousins getting? I just wrote him up the other day. We'll do a for the premium side. We'll do free agent stuff. What? Okay, Jacob. Okay, Jacob taking a Fortnite break here, but wants to make sure I do not turn off Fortnite. Okay. Anyway, we'll have free agent stuff for that. But I think for Cousins, I'm gonna guess he's gonna get another deal that's probably right around $35 million a year, maybe a little bit more than that. Probably be 2 years guaranteed. That's my assumption. What's the biggest name that you see being cut? Man, I went over the cuts the other day, and I don't know if I really remember. As to the big names, and it's going to be a name like, I mean, it should be Keenan Allen or Khalil Mack. That's probably going to be the biggest names. But there'll be a couple guys that get released. Jake, what's the limit you would pay Cousins on a 2-year deal to try and compete? Can you roll his void years into a new deal? Or is it better to trade from 12 to 4, get a Daniels, and need dead money next year? So, I think Minnesota would be better off moving on. I don't know if they will or they won't. In the short term, they may look at this that it's better to have Cousins on the team than off the team at a $28 million cap hit, that it's better to have him on the team and try to compete for the playoffs again. While Minnesota's record fluctuates, I mean, it's a team that's just feels like they're eternally going to be stuck right around being like a 500 type team. I don't know why you would keep buying into that with Cousins. I think you would be better off letting Cousins go to somewhere else and, really starting your rebuilding process over. But that's just me. That's just my thought on it. I could easily see a scenario where they're like, we got to bring Cousins back. And when you see Cousins with that last game, he's out, doing all the stuff before the game, the shirt off, and his kid, I guess, is with him. It's like, they're going to keep him, aren't they? It's like that's all that's popping into my head. It's that they're going to keep him. Michael, so much talk about incentives this week. Incentives earned or otherwise paid out impact next year's cap. Or do teams have to give themselves enough cushion on the current year to pay out whatever's earned? They get adjusted towards next year's cap. So if they're earned but they didn't count on this year's cap, you get a negative adjustment next year. And vice versa. If something counted on this year's cap but was not earned, you get a credit for it the following year. And if it counted on the cap this year and it was earned, you already have it covered, so there's no adjustment that's needed. So that's basically how it works. The only difference is if you actually pay the incentive, like actually pay the cash, you will have to account for it on the cap this year. The other thing is if you did restructure a contract and the incentive had already been earned, they'll charge it on the cap. But that rarely happens. So that's a very rare scenario. If the Bears decide to move on from Fields, what do you think the market is? Started the Darnold package. Interested to hear your thoughts on how they should approach 1-1 and 110. Thanks and cheers. Yeah, cheers. So I talked about that before, but I didn't talk about his market. I think his market would be a second round pick. Maybe it would be a third. And it would be an easily attainable, conditional that would get you to a second pick, like, 60% playing time or something like that. And, probably something that playoffs or something like that, maybe that could get you to a first round pick. So I think it would be a 3-2-1 scenario. So I don't think, and you could get something where it's you get this year, you give back in the future. So in other words, you would get a third this year. If it's something that jumped up to a first, you would give them your third and you would get a first. Something like that maybe could work out. I don't think it would be the Darnold package. I think the Darnold package was in part based on, number one, a desperate team. All right, in Carolina. Number two, it was based on the fact that they thought they were trading with an inept. They were trading with an inept team, but it was the thought that they didn't have coaching to help Darnold, they didn't have players to help Darnold, and if you put him in a different system, you could help Darnold. And what they learned is maybe that not maybe beyond help, but that there's he not a top level quarterback. But Darnold was considered a very high end prospect when he was drafted, and I think because at times he was functional with the Jets, and the Jets were dysfunctional his entire time that he was there. I think that they were able to find a team to trade for him that just looked at that upside and blamed all the negativity on the Jets. A lot of teams passed on Justin Fields in the draft. A lot of teams did not get the opportunity to pass on Sam Darnold. That's a big difference. I don't think people look at the Bears as inept. I think they look at the Bears and they see the way that they went out and try to get receivers for their quarterback. That they've tried to make a couple of moves to get the defense better. Made changes at coaches to change, certain things. So I don't think people are going to look at Fields and say Fields was broken from the Bears. I think they're going to look at that and simply say, Fields was okay, but maybe the Bears overdrafted him, in the first round. So I think that's probably where it would be at with them. You look at it probably as like a 2, but I think that's the case. Another question from Steven here. Couldn't a player take less money as long as they got fully guaranteed money? For example, player wants 14.5 total, team only wants to pay 11.5, so they could settle at 10 fully guaranteed. And was happy and saves team some money. Or am I missing something? I think, those numbers that you're mentioning there probably wouldn't work. What you would be looking at is player wants 14.5, team wants to pay 10. Player accepts a deal with 10 fully guaranteed. I mean, it would probably work out more like that. Teams will always guarantee money if it means getting a contract for less value. And less value might not mean annual value. It might just mean cash terms, or annual, 3-year annual value, something like that. Teams will always trade guarantees for that because when they get into a contract with someone, they're basically projecting how many years they expect that contract to run. So, whatever maximizes the value over the term they think the player is going to be there for is what a team is going to be willing to do. One of the things that we had discussed years ago on the podcast was would something ever exist where you would get a player who was willing to do a way below market deal in terms of annual value if we took a 5-year deal, get paid the same over, say, a 3-year term. But, let's say that you had a player, talking, I don't know, maybe $20 million a year. Sorry, I had to help with something on Fortnite there. So I think what I was talking about here was, the fully guaranteed money, the concept of the contract. So the interesting thing would be, trying to come up with an example here. Let's say a player is going to earn like $20 million a year, or wants to earn $20 million a year. Contract that would be 5 years, $100 million, $40 million full, $60 million injury. Looking at that kind of contract, that'd be the Amari Cooper contract. There's like outside chance that you're in the 60 on the guarantee. Now, obviously, he got traded. He ends up earning it. Might earn the whole contract. But, this is, I think, a decent example of some of the pros and cons and some of the thoughts that would go into it. What would you do? Team doesn't want to, let's say a team doesn't want to do that deal. Would you be willing as a player, you're looking at that contract expecting to earn 60. Would you be willing to take a 5-year deal worth, say, $75 million? Obviously, that's a much lower annual value, but where the team guarantees you that entire salary. They guarantee you the 75. So, I think something like that might be a interesting scenario where, you start coming up with those. So using Cooper as an example, if you were the Cowboys or the Browns, you would really be getting a bargain by having a player like that at 75.5. 75 for 5 years, right? You would make out, pretty well doing that, versus the 100 over 5. So would a player be willing to do that and be happy with the contract and not, want to renegotiate or open it up again? The negative for a team is if the player, is one of these guys that wouldn't have even made the 60 million. It's like, oh, now we're stuck with him to the 75 level. That would be okay, Jake, put your headphones back on.
No, my controller fell.
So that would be the example of like the Deshaun Watson, like that disaster that exists right there, that, the contract will never, be reasonable given the way that he's played. But, I think that would be an interesting scenario. Nobody's approached this yet. Nobody has brought this out. And it would take, two sides to do something different, because from the team end, you'd be fully guaranteeing a contract. And there's teams that clearly do not want to do that unless it's like a 1 or 2 year deal. Would players want to do it to where, instead of getting, that benefit of, getting to run out there and saying, yeah, he's making 20 million a year, you've got to say, well, he's making 15. It's like that I think would be a really interesting discussion, but nobody's gotten there yet. And I don't know if teams want to get there. I think teams are kind of happy with, if they have to, renegotiating a deal to give a guy a raise versus getting locked into some of these contracts, with the exception of quarterbacks. Quarterbacks get locked into. Turn off the Jets blog. Can the Jets cut Lazard now, or are they stuck with him for a few years? They're pretty much stuck with him for next year. They certainly can't cut him right now. They have to wait at least until the new league year begins, because the salary is guaranteed next year. But yeah, they're pretty much stuck. That's GM Rogers and his Randall Cobb, Dalvin Cook, Alan Lazard, crew that he needed to bring in. I mean, it's all a disaster. And man, the Dalvin Cook thing, speaking of nonsense, now Dalvin Cook did waive his per game bonus for the week, so he could get cut. I guess he waived the guarantee on it. It counts on the cap. Jets will get a credit for it next year. It is kind of funny to see all the people like, oh my God, Dalvin Cook is on the market. He's on the market. No team wanted to pick him up when it would have cost them about $270. Somewhere in the ballpark of $340,000. No team wanted to do it. He signed to a practice squad. A practice squad. How are we doing full segments on what does Dalvin Cook bring to the Ravens in the playoffs? Look, Dalvin Cook might be fine on the Ravens. He might get them a couple scores. He might do some stuff. It's nothing any other back in the league wouldn't have been able to do. It's like the amount of publicity sometimes that goes for a name player is wild when some of these guys get released. All right. Anyway, let's see. A couple more questions, and then we should be done here. All right. Last call. Looks like 5. That's a junk one, so we're going to call it 4. Jalen, Mason Rudolph's next contract outline, if this was his final snap of the season, probably pretty similar to what he has now. Where is he at? Rudolph's probably in the $2 million range. Am I just missing him here? Let's pick it. How am I missing him? There's Mason Rudolph. Oh, he was at 1-0? I thought he was at 2. Yeah, he'll probably get signed to just a low-level deal, 2.5, something like that. You throw some incentives in there with an opportunity to compete for something, 2.5, maybe 3. But, I don't think anybody's going to look at Mason Rudolph the last couple of weeks and, you know, I don't care what the record was, say that there was anything meaningful there, winning a game in the rain against all the Ravens backups and all that stuff. Dreadful. What'll Dak's next contract extension look like? I mean, he really does have the Cowboys by a lot. My guess is the aim is 60. I think before I said 55, but I forgot Burrow already got to 55. Probably 58 is what it's going to come in at, and it'll be a very player-friendly deal. They're just not going to have a choice. Flip. Scenario for Cousins. Vikings keep him. How would a contract look? Trade. Could they do it with the accelerated prorated bonus hit, June 1? So, if the Vikings keep him, I think the Vikings would look to just do another year at what they just did, which is 135, and they'd guarantee it coming off injury. For them to trade him, that's not going to happen. They would need to sign him to a contract with him agreeing to a trade. I don't think he would do that. June 1 designation. I don't believe his contract was designed for that, so they would have had to modify his contract today. Anything is possible. They would have had to do that. They would have, had to do that today if they want to do that. I don't think the Steelers can make cap room for him, but what do you think he takes for a contract? Prove it, 3-year backloaded. I think he's just going to take a 2-year deal. I think that's what it'll be, and he'll continue his, string of guaranteed salaries here. All right, last question. It's coming from Brian. Can the Browns keep Amari Cooper without extending him, or is an extension necessary? I'm pretty sure they can keep him without extending him. I didn't look that close. Let me pull up the Browns here. I know they're over the cap, but yeah, it's 13 over. I mean, you can restructure Cooper's contract without doing anything. You'd gain $12 million in cap room, so you'd be cap compliant. You can restructure Watson, gain 34. I know it sounds terrible, but I mean, he's not going anywhere. You can restructure. You can't gain much with Garrett. They already finished that. Denzel Ward, Tonio, you can gain a little bit with. Teller, a couple of bucks. Wills a little bit. So yeah, I mean they'll be fine. I think even without doing an extension for him, because like I said, they can restructure him and they can restructure Watson. Watson, it's a done deal. You just look at it as sunk cost, and you're just working through however bad those numbers are going to be. But it's going to be up to them. But they can function without having to do that. All right, so I think that does it for me. So everybody enjoy the last week of the regular season. I think this has been a lousy regular season. I'm not just speaking as a Jets fan. I just think in general for football, I think this has been a lousy regular year. There's a lot of quarterback injuries, a lot of teams. A lot of teams that you look at that are even like the better teams that are going to make the playoffs. Maybe make some noise. Maybe you have a nice playoff run. Probably disappointed by the year. Like Chiefs are probably disappointed by the season. Bills make it, don't make it. Probably disappointed by the regular season. A lot of these teams that are making the playoffs, like the Eagles, you probably almost have that feeling like, yeah, we made the playoffs, but man, this wasn't that good. So yeah, I think it's been a down regular season for the league. But hopefully it'll be an exciting playoffs. So we'll see. So, all right, everybody have a great week, and I will talk to you all again soon.